Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. I'm your host Faiza Naqvi in your old show Meri, Pehchan. And I hope and pray that you all are doing well by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah protect you and guide you in the right direction and keep you all safe from all the worldly evils and bless you all with all the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and keep you all safe and protected wherever you are. Today we have a special topic we're going to discuss, and before I go to the topic, I would say like if a human is weak, all the outside realities would affect his personality and his health, or maybe his mind and his heart. If in the same way, if a country, a nation, or a millah, you can say ummah, is not in good health overall, then they are like going to get affected by the outside realities as well. And even having, like, if they even have all the resources with them, like wealth and land and everything, but their resources are just being used against them. And this is kind of disempowerment, which is affecting all the Muslim country in overall scenario, if we see. So today we're going to talk about Muslim ummah disempowerment, political disempowerment around the globe. And we're going to see like why is that disempowerment exists, even though when we have more than 50 countries who are Muslim and they are having all the resources one can imagine of, and even then they are struggling with their decision power, their internal and external matters. They are like still kind of not providing what they can provide to their people and what they can do for the ummah in totality, if we say. For this topic, we have a wonderful guest to talk about, and we're gonna move on to our guest, Dr. Rebecca Masterton. She is a known scholar, writer, and mashallah, a wonderful speaker, and you all know her already, mashallah. Welcome to the show, Sister Rebecca. I'm very grateful for your time, and it's an honor to have you on the show. And I'm very thankful that you took some time out for us and came out for speaking on this important topic. Thank you so much.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, sister, and assalamu alaikum to everyone who is watching, and thank you so much for the invitation.
You are most welcome. Sister, I would go to the topic directly and would like to know first, like, what is political disempowerment? And why we are more concerned about like Muslim political disempowerment. So how would you define it actually?
What we see today, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad Muhammad. What we see today is the majority populations in many Muslim countries not being educated and not being informed by their leaders of what the real issues are. And this goes back a long way. So it's very important to understand the long history behind this progression towards Muslims becoming disempowered. This goes back to the colonial era. And often today, if there's, for example, an emergency, a war, a conflict, then we often kind of react just to some news items that we see. We have like a quick reaction to what is going on at the moment, but we don't always understand what is going on. I would argue that from what I have seen of talking to many different Muslim communities in different countries, we don't really have now a big difference between East and West. I have been quite surprised when I have gone to Middle East, for example. I've been asked by people there, can you please talk to our youth about Islam? And I'm so surprised because I'm thinking, well, you know, you are a Muslim majority country, you have a lot of access to Islamic resources, but you now have the same problems of a change in. You now have the same problems as communities do in the West as well. So this is a global issue, and it has many factors involved in it. Going back to the issue of the colonial history, the colonial legacy, what we're still living with. We know that there's that Indian historian Shashi Tharoor, who's talked a lot about how the British Empire managed to destroy India, and basically how the British Empire just robbed the countries that it was ruling. Yeah, I remember 20 years ago when I was working in a company that had a majority Hindu staff, actually. They were very pro-monarchy. They were all for the British monarchy at the time. I remember when Princess Diana died, they were all devastated by her death. And I was so surprised that they had no kind of critical understanding of the wider situation of what's going on. And so in order for us to understand why Muslims have been disempowered, we have to look at what is a system that has been set up since the colonial times that has utilized a corrupt elite and then disempowered, kind of middle class, working class people, agricultural people. In Muslim majority countries, a lot of them are still agricultural. They were working on the land, people working on the land who didn't get access to an education. Whereas we see in the West with the Industrial Revolution and the building of factories and so on, and the rise of a middle class, step by step, the nations became better. There has been a lot of propaganda that has come along with colonialism, modernity, industrialization, and this is what we need to understand. I've been reading this book, and I can recommend it to all the viewers. This is called Secret Affairs by Mark Curtis, and he is a British journalist, and he's writing about going way back to the beginning of the 20th century. He's writing about how the British Empire, and then after that British governments, actually worked together with Wahhabi and Salafi networks in order to get access to resources in Muslim majority countries. That could be Middle East countries, Afghanistan, Pakistan, even Bosnia. So I can really recommend this to everybody who wants to become better informed of what is going on behind the scenes. Because what we have with our, sorry, yeah, I could go on. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to ask one thing. You were talking about like elites who are not like very good, and they are in power when we talk about the British Empire or something like that. But when we, as a Pakistani or Indians or people from South Asia, think about like Britain and people from Britain, we think like they are very honest, and when they are very good people and they are doing wonderful job, and we are like very impressed emotionally, mentally, or you can say intellectually. We think like they are much better than us and doing wonderful job. So how do you see this contradiction? Like if they are these such elites are robbing our resources, then I mean how we should respond to them, and why we are under this impression they are very good people and they are like helping us instead of robbing us.
Yes, well, they have. If you remember that England, and then that became Britain with the kind of the colonial. England and Scotland and Wales and Ireland gradually became this thing called Britain, but it's really kind of run by. Uh, they have maybe 400 years experience of getting other people's resources. And
Hmm.
when you look at quite a few, say, videos on YouTube about how the British Empire expanded, that I can't remember exactly which video it was, but there was a video explaining about it, saying how the British, the French, the Europeans, when they went out to colonize countries, they basically blocked those countries, they fooled countries into thinking that, wow, these people are so superior and they don't get ill. I mean, the French, when they occupied West Africa, they even had a strategy that if any one of their administrators got sick, they would take to France. So Africans
Hmm.
never saw a
Hmm.
Frenchman or woman getting ill or dying. And so they thought, I mean, I studied this 20 years ago. West African people being occupied by the French, they thought that these people don't get sick and die
Hmm.
in the same way that Africa do. And it wasn't until the First World War when African men started to become conscripted into the army and brought over to France to fight Germany. And they're fighting side by side with other Europeans. They saw for the first time, oh my God, they get
Hmm.
sick like we do. They die like we do. They bleed like we do. And and in one video about how the British occupied India, so they didn't have at that time. I mean, obviously, the East India Company eventually it built up this huge army. Now the question is, why was the East India Company allowed by the Arabs and by the rule? Why were they allowed to build up such a big army? That's one question that people haven't asked themselves. Anyway, they built up this huge army, but they said that they managed to bluff people in the subcontinent. They managed to fool them into thinking that they are more respectable and more powerful than they really were. In the beginning, they didn't have large numbers, but what they did was just kind of managed to uh, they were salespeople. They managed to, you know, convey to the rulers that they are very good people, they are very efficient. And what the British did, they did this in the subcontinent before the splitting of India and Pakistan. They did this in Egypt as well. How they work their way in is to offer to help to run the economy. This
Hmm.
is what they did. So, for example, with what was then India, they went to the Nawabs and they said, and the landowners, and they said, you know, we can help you to collect your taxes more efficiently. They just
Hmm.
they worked out legal systems and systems. They said to people at the time, well, we've got the technology know-how and we can help you to run things more efficiently. And so the landowners and the Nawabs were like, okay, fine, yes, very good. And eventually this is how they worked their way in until they managed to get total control of the economy.
Hmm.
This is a couple of strategies that they used.
That's nice to tell. Like, so how would you say, like, in if today's era we want to see, like, if a young person want to know what's going on in our countries, like collectively, if we see as Muslim Ummah, like, we do have all the resources. For example, if we say like oil or mines or whatever we call, we name it, and we do have almost, if we collectively see, we do have all the resources in Muslim countries. But what is the reason, like, all the Muslim countries are in chaos of power? Like, they are like being attacked, bombed and ruined, and their historical things are also, heritage is also, ruined in such wars and things like that. So why where is the power in these countries, and why they are not using against, like in terms of resistance, why they are not resistance when they have, for example, if I say Pakistan, for example, it has everything. It has army, it has government, it has people, it has every resource which can protect a country as a state. But why we are so disempowered that anyone comes here and say like, you can't make this law, for instance, and you don't have to, because you have to meet these requirements from Muslim, so for example, I mean, from Britain or America or whoever asked them to do. So why we are so much disempowered, even though we do have all the, resources we need for running a country? And don't you think like IMF is playing the same role as East India Company did play the role in their time? So in today's scenario, IMF is playing this role and controlling the resources and things like that. So how would you respond to that?
Yeah, very, very good point. I looked what happened with Ireland. So Ireland was occupied for 900 years by the English, and the Irish people have, a long, long experience of being oppressed, of having their resources drained away from their land, and uh, having been disempowered by, for example, a culture of drinking being
Mm,
inculcated in that country. We see, for example, in Muslim countries, similarly, like, for example, in Afghanistan, United States were known, occupying forces were known for protecting opium lands and the growing of opium. And then they oversee the supply of opium and heroin that is going into Iran, and that is disempowering Iran. So there are many strategies for disempowering occupied nations. I mean, when you look at peoples who have been had their land and resources taken away from them, they are also often encouraged to become alcoholics or drug addicts. And we look at the
mm,
Native Americans, where Native American women are often incapable of taking care of their children because they're alcoholics. They're just not capable of managing their families. So there's a lot of psychological and emotional and mental damage that goes along with being occupied. One thing I notice in Ireland, when you look at Irish history, is that Ireland was run by different tribes. So there was an event in Irish history called the Flight of the Earls, or the Flight of the Lords, which is Elizabeth I in the 16th century moved into Ireland, and these different lords, landowning lords, because they couldn't unite with each other, that left the way open for the English to move in, and they took over their land. And then ever since then, they occupied their land. And then they brought in limitations on education and jobs and many other things. So they limited Irish people's access to education and jobs. And so, again, England has a long, long history of occupying other countries, strategies to occupy other countries. So we can see that in Muslim majority countries like the Middle East or Pakistan, we still have very much, for example, when we look at Iraq, uh, Iraq is still run by tribes, it's still run by large families. So, government, this is really just a superficial layer of what is the real nature of this, which is that we have families that are battling with each other for power and influence. And so
mm,
this is one factor that allows something like Britain to exploit those divisions that already exist. And so that is one factor. And another thing is that we have a long history, of course, like I said, with regard to the elites, is that Britain, as an example, will go to the Pakistani government, and they will again say, it's the same old argument. They will say, you have these minerals in your mountains, or you have this pipeline, that's running through dangerous territory. And so let's work together, and then we can do business together, and we'll do a deal. You get a percentage of the oil, or you get a percentage of the minerals, and we get a percentage for helping you. When we
mm,
look at Pakistan, actually, and as Mark Curtis says, I mean, it's kind of ironic that Britain, the West, had this kind of so-called war on terror, right? But has
mm,
actively supported, the Pakistan intelligence training of mullahs in Afghanistan and other regions where Britain wants to have control of the resources. So Britain has funneled in arms and funds to help Pakistani intelligence train up militias and other people coming in, Chechens and so on. Number one, in order to push the Soviets out of that region. That happened in the 80s and 90s. And number two, to maintain control of the Silk Route, what we know as the Silk Route, and that whole Central Asian lands with all of its resources. This information, so this journalist has been working with what's called declassified documents. So that means that
mm,
at one point, all of this information was classified. That means that your average population uh, cannot access this information. And this
mm,
we find with pretty much any country that you go to. I mean, we have in streets, demonstrations and emotional campaigns, and Twitter campaigns, and this, that, and the other. But when you try to maybe find out a little bit more of what's going on behind the scenes, you will find it's very difficult to get access to information on what is going on behind the scenes. This man used to work for government. This is
mm,
how he managed to get all that information. So he's not like your average person on the street. He had access to libraries and files and documents and so forth. And there's going to be a reason why he's still able to operate, and he hasn't been disappeared yet.
mm,
There's going to be a reason. So your average populations in Muslim countries don't get access to this information. They see what's going on, but they don't know exactly who's pulling the strings.
mm,
Another thing is that we're constantly kind of discussing about how we can be better religiously. We
mm,
have this idea of how to be better Muslims, how to learn more about Islam, but our lectures and on our training of the youth seems to be divorced from empowering the youth on how to know what's going on in their countries, and how to
mm,
be aware that they have a right to
mm,
these resources. I saw when
mm,
I was in Iraq, and I'm meeting the widowed family, the widows whose husbands have been killed fighting Daesh. These widows and families are the poorest of the poor. They literally have nothing. I mean, these families should be honored. They should be, treated like they are heroes. They should be given
mm,
everything. They've been
mm,
utilized to fight Daesh, and they're left to survive on their own. And what I noticed about them was that they don't even have a sense of entitlement. They don't even
mm,
have a sense that we have right to be recompensed for the sacrifice that we've made. So,
mm,
so this is how people are kept disempowered. Is also by not being made aware to more. You know, they have a right to have some recompense for the sacrifices that they have made. So when we're thinking about what do we need to be a Muslim, we read about, we need to make sure you are on time, make sure you do your fasting. read Quran. But this is all divorced from what is actually going on in our world. How do we deal with the situation today? And yes, we
Hmm.
might be encouraged to go on a couple of demonstrations about this, but that ultimately is not doing anything to actually re-empower population, to give populations the real power that they need to change the situation.
Hmm. So, how would you suggest, like, to the youths, especially, for example, if we have to build such community which who are really aware and know how to understand the problem and how to deal with that problem and how to resolve it as a community. So, what steps our community, and our youth should take in order to reach that goal, which could empower them as a person, as a community, and as a an influence on the, for example, kind of pressure groups in each country they have, which can ask states not to do certain things which are, like, for example, waging wars on innocent people and things like that. So how would you suggest, like, what a youth have a plan, I mean, what kind of plan our youth may have in order to acquire that knowledge, understanding, wisdom, and planning to achieve such goals?
Hmm. So, first of all, I would say get as many books as you can on
Hmm.
colonial history, how Britain,
Hmm.
how France, particularly these two countries, occupied Muslim majority countries. What were their strategies? Because what
Hmm.
we see today, I see it time and time again, especially for, say, um, young Muslims, say in the UK, their parents might be Pakistani. One parent might
Hmm.
have been born in the UK, the other parent might have come directly from Pakistan. And the
Hmm.
youth at the moment are being raised in a contradictory way. So
Hmm.
they are being contradictory messages. One message is that you must be a good Muslim. Like I said, study your Quran, wear hijab, pray on time. This is one message they're being given. Oh, you know, remember the sacrifice of Imam Hussein alayhi salam in the month of Muharram, attend your majalis, recite your noha, stand up against oppression. This is one message they're being given. And then the other message they're being given is you must succeed in the British educational system. The idea of success in the British educational system is to get your A levels, get your degree, get a job in banking, get a job in, you know, British media, and or an oil company. And this is where the contradiction is in,
Hmm.
because wait a minute, you just told me that I'm supposed to fight against oppression, but at the same time, you're telling me that you're going to be proud of me if I end up working for Shell Oil Company, as an example. And I have
Hmm.
seen this on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I've got 6,000 people on LinkedIn. And I see all the time young people saying, my parents are so proud of me. I just qualified as an attorney or as a lawyer after attending law school in the United States, for example. And my
Hmm.
parents are crying tears of happiness. And it's like, yeah, but that means you're going to be operating as a lawyer in the US system, right? So how are you going to be serving the message of Imam Hussein or the objectives of Imam Hussein when you're actually ultimately just going to be working for a legal system that operates against the principles of
Hmm.
Imam Hussein? Or, you know, oh, I'm so proud. I received this award for being the best accountant for JP Morgan, as an example. Well, um, can't you see that you are being groomed by these Western multinational companies, right? So that's something to be proud of when all you're doing is being a servant
Hmm.
and assisting these companies that are ultimately taking a country or your grandparents' country. So this is where the contradictory message is hammered in Muslim youth, and so all the ultimate aims that they are given. This is where we go wrong. What is your
Hmm.
ultimate aim? Our ultimate aim should be to empower ourselves economically as well. I
Hmm.
know that in Pakistan, for example, somebody told me when someone sets up a medical practice, they still
Hmm.
have to get approval from a medical society or whatever in order to practice in Pakistan. Like, this is
Hmm.
absolutely ridiculous. Like, why do you have to, if you're setting up a medical practice in Pakistan, why do you have to get a stamp of approval from the UK Medical Society in order to run your practice? This is not
Hmm.
questioned. When you look at states, the
Hmm.
Gulf states, if you want to be a lecturer in a university in any of the Gulf states, the Gulf states only allow someone who has been qualified from a Western university, a British or an American university. Only someone who has a PhD from a Western university can teach in a Gulf state university. So that means if you're from Oman and you've got all your education in Oman, you can't go and teach in a university in Oman
Hmm.
or Abu Dhabi or any of these countries. So
Hmm.
so it's like, can't you see that you are still being ripped off? Now, how the
Hmm.
British have always worked is by allegedly the legal route. They
Hmm.
invent laws. They invent laws that are actually there to stitch people up. This is how they stop Muslim tabibs practicing. This is how they stopped the
Hmm.
practice of Islamic subcontinent over 100 years ago. They brought in this system where, in order for a doctor, a Muslim doctor, to practice, they have to get a license from the colonial rulers.
Hmm.
And so, what would
So,
happen? The Muslim doctor applies for a
hmm.
license. Yeah, and then the person, sorry, no,
It's all right.
you
It's
don't
all right.
qualify to get
I
a
just wanted to
license.
ask. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Continue. Finish your
What I'm
conversation.
saying is that, yeah. So are all tricks that are being used. How the United
Hmm.
Kingdom operates ultimately is through a legal routes, and so the youth need to rise up the legal system and the legal duplicity that something like United Kingdom or United States are using.
Hmm. So how you think our, I mean, think tanks, for example, Muslim think tanks, do we have such think tanks who are working on that, or who can take the nation out of this, slavery? It's obviously the slavery of our skillful people and slavery of our nations, all over the world, and we doesn't fit in, or if we don't fit in, for example, in these places, obviously the way you have quoted some examples, they were really obvious. So why, where are our think tanks, and what they are doing to cater this problem, and what steps do you think our people should take in order to towards empowerment and political empowerment, our own institution, for example, we go to Harvard University, for instance, or in Cambridge or Oxford, for example. So why don't Muslim have their own universities which are worldwidely accepted, or for example, they have such kind of education or skills they are providing that other people would want to come in their places, when we can make, Imam Bargahs, mosque and other stuff all over the world? Then why can't we make such universities, such hospitals, such social groups which are serving our own people on our own made up rules or regulations, the way you stated that we need to have, they are obviously dealing with us through the legal ruling and through the rules they are providing us. So how do you think we can improve on that, and how we can achieve that, and why we couldn't do that so far?
Uh, so as you say, you've been talking about think tanks, and I'm not
Yeah.
really I mean, maybe there are, but I'm not really aware of any particular effective think tank that is addressing these issues. I
Hmm.
see faith organizations that I don't even know what these organizations are achieving. So we have a few prominent Shia, as an example, Muslim personalities that think they're
Hmm.
promoting some kind of harmony and understanding involved in these interfaith organizations, when in fact we know a good artist, now he's passed away, he was a journalist in the UK called Fuad Nahdi, and he wrote a very good article on how British interfaith organizations are actually just, again, a means of managing religious communities, that they're only interested in how those communities can be psychologically managed and tamed. So plans of action are, we actually need to set up these think tanks. One thing
Hmm.
that is a problem that we haven't thought about is the fact that when people do try to put their neck on the line, so to speak, to combat corruption, they're
Hmm.
often killed, they're assassinated. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, this is how deeply it goes. We really have to think about, uh, it's not only kind of looking at legal strategies, but it's also looking at the problem of who is in power, who is in control of arms in these countries.
Hmm.
I mean, okay, things are a lot more covert. We don't have armed tribes here.
Hmm.
Someone's not going to necessarily just go and kill someone if that person tries to speak out against them. We know this happens in Muslim majority countries. I mean, people kind of
Hmm.
sort out their own problems using their own arms. So it's not just the legal route, but it's also looking at how people who are campaigning against corruption can be protected, in protected against assassination. And so far we are totally asleep as to, what
Hmm.
happens is you might get one or two people campaigning against corruption, but they are, in danger of being taken out. So it's a very, very dangerous situation as well. And what I see in the Muslim communities in the West is that they just don't want to know. Ultimately, they are very comfortable with their jobs. They're
Hmm.
very comfortable working for the British Civil Service. They're very comfortable with their nice homes in the suburbs and the countryside, and they have been psychologically subjugated for the last 50 years.
Hmm.
They don't have that courage to
Hmm.
take any step whatsoever. Their mentality is, oh, keep your head below the parapet, don't rock the boat, don't cause any problems. I don't
Hmm.
want I don't want to take any risk. And maybe that is the message that's being given to the youth by their parents. Keep your head
Hmm.
down, be a good Muslim, be a nice person, don't rock the boat. And so we have, another generation coming up that is blinded by the desire for status and wealth, and hasn't been trained to combat corruption. We are totally disempowered. We have no system for assisting people who want to actually take against those that are illegally taking resources out of these countries. We need think tanks. We
Hmm.
need people that are courageous. Yeah.
Hmm. So, do you think, like, from what I can absorb is that, like, we are like just practicing Muslim, but practically we are supposed not to do anything. We are supposed to keep ourselves safe in terms of, for example, jobs or money, or maybe we not get assassinated just in case if we take action towards our rights or something like that. So, uh, how do you think? I mean, how long would it take to get rid of these problems? And how do you see the role of media in that scenario? If we see in today's time, we do have, you can say, hundreds of channels coming up. So, do you think they are really educating the minds, especially the Muslim channels and the channels we see in the names of Ahlul Bayt, for example? So, do you think they are really serving the message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam in terms of courage, in terms of building that community which is based on, truthfulness and the justice and the rules of, everything, which is under laws of, you can say, Quran, or from Ahlul Bayt we have. So, do you think they are also, doing the job they were supposed to do in order to educate the mind, souls, and hearts, and telling them this is your duty and this is something we are lacking and we need to work on that? The way you are saying, like, we don't have even think tanks, at least we can't think of like this. That's what I also sometimes think. We don't know where to look at. I mean, who is going to guide us, and who should take steps, because we all are so, I mean, disempowered that if we say something and do something, we will be assassinated, we will be killed, or our families would be suffering in some way, whatever way. And so we just need to keep our mouths shut, and we don't need to do this and we don't need to do that. It's enough that we are earning good and having good home, and having good, you can say, employment, and that's it. That's the things we are here to live for, and something like that. So, how do you see all that, and how do you see the media role and the roles of ulemas, especially, as well? So, if you can connect these two three things as well and explain
Mhm.
what they are supposed to do and what they are not doing at the moment.
So, I mean, I obviously, because I don't speak Urdu, I'm not so. I know that there are many more Urdu speaking channels that are talking about the message of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And what we see with regard to a lot of these channels is that um, the, I mean, they talk a lot about the Sunni Shi'i debates. And
Hmm.
so of the Shia viewers, they feel like they are achieving something if they have a speaker on the channel, on their channel, who's just going on about, the Sunni Shi'i history and what happened to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. This is very much the focus on the Ahlul Bayt channels. It's always about what happened to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. This is, of course, very important, but we have many, many other um, things that we need to deal with, because while we are preoccupied with Sunni Shi'i hadith debates, for example, um, we have whole networks of companies and prominent figures in both, say, Pakistan and Iraq, as an example, that are busy ripping the people off. That are,
Hmm.
I mean, again, in Iraq, some people were going around asking some average Iraqi Shia questions about the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. These people didn't even know how many times you're supposed to pray a day,
Hmm.
and they didn't even know how many imams there were. And this is in Iraq.
Hmm.
So, and this is because they're not being given education that they should be given. So, the role of the media is to, again, make the youth aware of what we've just been talking about, to make them aware of what is happening in the world today, to think about what is our future. At the moment, we don't really have being given a vision of what our future should be. We're just looking at things short term. We always look at things in the present. What's the latest conflict to worry about? Have a vision of what is our, apart from we need to prepare for the coming of Imam Zaman, Ajjalallah Faraj Sharif. But that's a very okay, but what about in a concrete fashion, the next 10, 25, 10, 20 years? For example, we need to put an end to the practice of fraud, financial cheating, and lying. This is rife in Muslim majority countries. I hear about it from people in Lebanon. They tell me in Lebanon it's common for people to lie and cheat financially. We hear about it in Pakistan as well, lying and cheating. Uh,
Yeah.
Naturally, in other countries. Yesterday, I was talking to a lady who's living in Egypt. For Islamic history, especially the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. This lady who I was talking to, she said there is so much lying and cheating going on. So, I mean, Muslims need to take responsibility themselves to start off with. We have to stamp out this culture of
Mm.
lying and cheating and just kind of letting that pass.
Yeah.
Because to be a Muslim, what is it to be a Muslim? You have to be truthful. You have to be honest. You're not going to gain anything. We have to try to work against this culture of bribery as well. So we have to reform our own morality. We see with the channels that are going on at the moment is that actually they don't have large viewership. When you look at how many people are actually looking at these channels, youth are going away. They're looking at non-Muslims to try to give them the answers to what is going on with today's social challenges. The
Mm.
Muslim speakers who've got millions of views on YouTube. We look at our channels, right? How many views do they have on YouTube? A few hundred, a few thousand, and yet we keep on churning out the same type of programs. We have to reform our program content. This is very important. Is our program content actually reaching out to the youth? So we have to kind of stop this culture of thinking that young people need to be told how to be, in terms of their hair, talking about hijab and in terms of their zakat and their fasting and so on. We need to listen to the youth and we need to connect to the youth, and we need to look at how other speakers who have got millions of views, who the youth are going to, we need to look at them and think, well, how is it that they are answering the youth's questions in a way that we are not answering the questions of the youth? These are some of the things that we need to do. We need a reform of the so-called Shia Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam channels. We need to put more resources in to providing better content.
That's true. So, how would you see the role of the leaders? I mean, in our countries, and why are they not? I mean, doing anything? Obviously, one of the reasons you have told me in your conversation is corruption in all terms, in all levels, in most of our countries as well. So how do you see the role of leaders, why they are not unable to lead the community, if even if we see them as a political leader, even if we see them as a religious leaders, or even if we see them as a an institutional leader? Don't you think like they are just not visionary, the way you said earlier as well? Like they just have vision to succeed themselves, instead of they look at the community and how they should be succeeding for the future goals, for most importantly towards Imam Zamana, the way we are heading towards them. So what we are doing and what we are going to leave after we depart from this world, in terms of responsibility we have towards Imam Zabana. So we are just running out of time. So I would say, like, after this question, I would say, like, if you want to give a review about the book as well, you were talking about, if you want to add some more points on that, you can add that as well. So then we can finish, because time is nearly finished. We just have 5 minutes, you
Allah.
can say.
Okay. Yes. So, of course, we can't speak generally about um, religious leaders. There are good religious leaders, wonderful religious leaders, who have made huge sacrifices. Uh, their health. They have sacrificed their health. They've sacrificed their resources, and they have worked against very, very difficult odds. They don't have any private life. People call them day and night with all sorts of problems, and we can say that there's a handful of religious leaders who carry heavy burdens on their backs. So first of all, we should thank the good religious who are taking a lot of burdens on their backs, and express our appreciation that they have done, and even ask like, how we can help them. So we have very good religious leaders who have made very big sacrifices, and then have others who, as I heard from the youth and population, for example, in the UK again, that when they come to speak, they don't have any content in their khutbas. I've heard this again from youth, from among Pakistani youth, Iraqi youth, doesn't matter who. They say, we have heard the same content in our majalis for the last 20 years. Usually it's about the fadail of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, but the youth know this. So actually, I was actually coining the phrase yesterday, time crime. This is a time crime, because what you're doing is you are taking people's time out, and you're not benefiting them by giving them the information that they need to deal with the actual issues at hand. So we must use this time not just as a performance for reciting the Fadail of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, but we need to actually have a vision of how these youth politically, and again, this doesn't mean revolution, so to speak. You could be having a revolution. You could be empowered, know how to gain access about people that are access to information about people who are corrupt, like this journalist has done, so that you can then train in law, train in journalism, and highlight what they're doing. So just a couple of minutes about this book again. So this is called Secret Affairs. It's by Mark Curtis. It's called Britain's Collusion with Radical Islam. I mean, obviously, he's kind of a British journalist, so he's going to use some terminologies that we might find problematic. But he talks about, again, this long history of United Kingdom civil service, and the weapons production factories in the UK, all of the elites, and how for over 100 years they have worked together with so-called terrorist organizations if and when it suits them in order to gain access to influence and resources. British government is always planning ahead. And for example, when we look at the conflict that's happening in Syria now, Mark Curtis highlighted that the conflict in Syria has been planned since the 1950s. So I know we're running out of time. So again, this is Secret Affairs. It's available on Amazon. And I would suggest this as a starting point for reading about what is going on behind the scenes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rebecca Masterton. I'm very grateful for your time, and it was really insightful discussion you did for all the youth and the community as well. And I'm honored to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your participation. And I would say to the viewers, like Rebecca said, like we need to empower ourselves through education. We need to give the right content to our youth through the Friday khutbas, and in the majalis as well, what they are supposed to know and how to empower themselves. They are supposed to know how they are being misused and abused in terms of their resources and their minds and their skills, etc. So we need to really think about it, and we should start working now towards the Zuhur of Imam Zaman alayhi salam. I hope and pray that you all doing well, and you may Allah protect you all and keep you all safe, healthy, and happy. I'll take a leave now. now, and inshallah we'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.